Welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm your host and advocate, Ali Kranz. These podcasts are here to gather stories, people and information to better our understanding of the wisdom of birth and how we can reclaim our connections to birth from conception and beyond. You will hear stories not only from Australia but from all over the world, bringing together women, partners, midwives, doulas and all the people that have had a birth story to share. So jump right in for this next Circle of Birth story. Hi all, welcome to the very first episode of the Circle of Birth podcast. And so I'm your host, Ali Kranz, and I'm going to start the show off this week with a birth story from my daughter. Now my daughter's name is Julia. She's 8 months old, and so I thought I'd start with her story because this is how it led me into doing what I'm doing right now. So we are a family of four. We're very much into food production and we value our health, and we live in a beautiful little town in New South Wales, and we have a son who is 6 years old and his name's Mali. And right now I'm into podcasting. Since Julia's birth, I have become completely, I think, obsessed with what is happening in the birth world, and the feeling that I had after her birth woken me to so many things and so many avenues, and I feel like I've just tapped into my niche. So there is this intention there to return to university and study midwifery and look at research, I guess, as my main aim, and I guess being a part of a system and then trying to endorse some change, I suppose, and create it more women-centred and more choice for women. I think that's, if you can wrap it up into a sentence, it's choice and acceptance of that choice. But we'll see how that goes. Right now I'm studying to be a doula, which I'm sure many people after their births have become a doula. And I would like to try and attend as many births as I can and really gain an understanding, I suppose, of the process. And with my midwife, I just found she just needed to look at me and she could tell what was happening, and I had that knowledge in me too during the birth. So I think that's something pretty special, and I'd like to explore that. So previously, I'd been involved with human health and environmental science, and I met my lovely partner, Nick. He is into permaculture education and holistic farming, and so we both love growing food, and we love eating food and eating good food and talking about eating good food. But for now, this is it. And this podcasting has just been a whirlwind, and it seems right. It just seems everything's falling into place with it, and the intent here for it is to just share as many stories as possible, because I just couldn't get enough of it. When I was pregnant with Julia, I just wanted to listen to them, but I read and read and read so many books, and I scrounged on the internet and forums for like even the touch of a story from someone. So I just knew that this was the right path to follow, and I just hope that many people can get on board and share many stories, and we can all connect and cultivate a bit of a community together with each other. So enough of that. I'm going to get straight on, and we're going to jump right into Julia's birth story. So my pregnancy with Julia, it came after a miscarriage that we had probably about 4 months prior to getting pregnant again with Julia. It was what was called a partial molar pregnancy, and I really feel that I probably will talk about that in another podcast and tell the story about that, because that might be helpful for a lot of women that have gone through. It's a very rare thing to happen. So with that pregnancy, I never felt connected to the baby. It was just such a bizarre feeling throughout the whole pregnancy. So we had the bleeding and lost the baby at 16 weeks, and that whole time I just never felt that connection. When I got pregnant with Julia, it was just completely different. The vast difference was amazing. So yeah, so another podcast I'll talk about that miscarriage. So you can imagine for us both, when we found out we were pregnant again, the start was a bit like, well, are we, or what do we do? And it was a bit anxious for a week or so there. I just didn't know for sure. And until I went to the doctor's appointment and organised the midwife again, and talking about it, it kind of resurfaced all those positive things about being pregnant again, and the rest tended to sort of fade into the background, and I felt more positive and more confident. So, and physically too, and that, like I said before, there was that connection there, and I really felt it. So at the start there was a lot of nausea, just typical the first trimester nausea, and all I wanted to eat was just weird white food and nothing exciting. In the mornings I used to be a big egg eater and green smoothies, and everything just dropped off. It was just muesli or toast with butter or something really boring. And in my mind I remember waking up and I'm like, I want eggs, I want them, and I want all this stuff. But then I would go and cook them and then run to the couch and have to lie down and like break into a sweat and deal with the smell. Realise how stupid that was. So apart from that, I threw up once and that was it. So it wasn't too bad, but obviously by the next trimester I got better, and I found just drinking a lot of tea helped actually. Rooibos tea and ginger oil. I used to drop a few drops of essential oil into my belly. So yeah, first trimester we re-engaged with our midwife again, and we had a beautiful student midwife who was a doula for 10 years, and she was fantastic as well. And we had a great relationship that we built up with them. And she actually helped us through the miscarriage too, as we were going to get her for that pregnancy. So the connection that we formed was just invaluable. We had a beautiful bond of trust with them both, and it was just, I looked forward every month to them coming over for a cup of tea and some cake or whatever, and we just would chat for an hour and a half, and I felt very relaxed and very confident in myself, and knowing that we discussed options and talked about all the things that you would, I suppose, as I did when I went through the hospital system, but I found it more centred around me and my choices, and I had more of a say and someone that looked in your eyes, and I just felt more connected, I suppose, to this experience. And again, I'll talk about Malvy's birth in another podcast too, and talk about those experiences and how I felt then too. And mind you, I was sort of 6 years younger, so it was a different person I was then. So the relationship was amazing, and we had a really good pregnancy. My body grew a lot, and it was I did a lot of research, I read a lot of books, and we had at about 20 weeks we had an interesting experience, which was a suspected pulmonary embolism, or PE, or a blood clot in the lung. I ended up going to hospital with a severe sort of shoulder pain that would run down to the left side of my arm, and I was seeing a physio at the time, and she recommended that if it keeps up that I go just check in with the hospital. And so I did, and next minute I'm on an ambulance into another hospital, and it was just a very funny and interesting experience. And we actually had to, again, take control back of my body and our baby, and really digress all the options that were given to us, because we had to really go home and sit on it and do the research. And I'm glad we did, because if we followed the protocol, it could have ended up a lot different for us. So, and there was no evidence to show what they suspected, and everything was fine. So we got home and we got over that, and that was probably the biggest sort of hiccup, I suppose. we enrolled in a calm birth course, probably about 30 weeks, which was just invaluable again for my partner and I, not only for me too, but for him to gain a bit of an understanding of the process of birth. It was positive and encouraging, and he felt he knew his role and how important it was, because he chose to be in the labour, and how his support was wanted. We had this really nice weekend by ourselves together, and we did some bonding, and it was great. The breathing exercises was one of the biggest things that I got out of that too. So pregnancy was great. Baby was doing really well, and I enjoyed nesting at the end of the pregnancy. Was one of my favourite things. I think I got fully into like nesty nest mode at about 35 weeks, and we ended up gutting our lounge room and taking all the couches out, and I set up the pool, and I set up all these pictures around the walls and little affirmations and candles, and I changed flowers once a week for about 3 or 4 weeks, just waiting for the birth, because I just wanted some nice fresh flowers, and that was kind of funny. So that went really well. So in terms of resources for pregnancy, during that period, physio I attended to, I had a really good bond with her, and she was someone I knew well, and so that quite helped. And she just helped me with some like adjustment side of things with the pregnancy, and acupuncture is another great resource too, for anxieties and earthing and that type of thing. And speaking of earthing, spending a lot of time barefoot is what I did too. I couldn't get enough of just getting my feet onto the ground, and if you look up earthing, it's a really sort of great resource too, is just getting your feet out and spending time barefoot, because we tend not to do that a lot, I suppose, in our modern busy lives. And the books, I will put up all the books that I've read, and I'm sure they will come up more and more in future stories, and I'm sure Ina May is just going to be talked about a lot too, but she was amazing and invaluable. I watched her movie, I read all her books, and of course the birth stories, I'm sure I read them twice in Spiritual Midwifery. And the videos, I think one of my favourites was, I think it was called Birth as We Know It, and there was a part there, so it was filmed in Russia, and I can't remember the lady's name. But anyway, one of the best parts was the ice dipping, the pregnant women dipping in the ice and then running back out and like breastfeeding, and it was just really beautiful. And the birthing, I think it was in the sea, and the kids were swimming with dolphins, and it was just so surreal, and it made me feel really dreamy about the whole process. So that was really cool. But I'll upload a lot of the other resources too. So getting into the labour, so we're looking at about, I think it was about 41 weeks, and then I began to feel that old familiar sensation. I just knew from when I was pregnant with Mally, the tightening and the movement, and I really actually felt her drop again, and it was really in tune with where she was in my body, and that was kind of nice. And we did spend a lot of time having baths during my pregnancy, and I would try and connect with her and do a lot of deep breathing during those bath times, and finding out where she was and trying to figure it out, because I was never as good as the midwives. Of like, they would just put their hand and be like, yep, she's this, and I'd be like, oh, well, I actually thought like she was there. So, and by that time she went posterior, and that's what happened with Mally too. And his labour, a lot of it was him being posterior, and I'm having this intense barrage of back pain that I didn't know what posterior was, and had no idea about all this, and panicked. And so there was a bit of anxiety there with her, and we went and got a session of acupuncture, a last session, and it was just amazing. As soon as he put the needles in and walked out the room, and I started breathing, she just turned around, and it was like this little scramble in my body. It was like, and she like turned around and she just got into that position. I was like, oh, thank you so much. And it was great. And the trip home, so we were about an hour away from where the acupuncture was. And so the trip home ended up mild contractions. So probably, say 10, 15 minutes apart. So one of the things we decided not to do was time, well, for me anyway, so Nick was welcome to if he decided. But, I just didn't want to know about timing or anything like that. So, but it felt like about 10 minutes, and they were very mild and gentle and just nice and getting me into that rhythm. And I forgot to mention, so prior to that 3 days, I had perhaps what you could call prodromal labour, where it was bang on 6 o'clock at night. You couldn't fault it. There was contractions, and they were really quite strong and, doing something. And I remember the first night, Nick and I were like, oh, we're going to have a baby. And we were all excited, and we stayed up, and nothing happened. And I went to sleep. I slept each night on my son's bed in the lounge, which was in the lounge at that time. And I had my breathing music on, or my breathing exercises, and I fell asleep with that. And I'd wake up in the morning and be like, oh, okay, nothing, and get on with your day. And 6 o'clock again, and rolled around. And luckily I sort of took the note and went, okay, well, this is where I need to rest. So stuff's happening, which is great. I need to rest. So I made sure that I just tried to ignore them, I guess, and not get excited or feel anything that was happening. I just thought, oh yeah, they're there, and observed them and just kept going with my things and slept, which was really funny. And that first night too, it was a full moon, and that first night I was so assured that I was going to have a baby, and so we didn't get any sleep. And I think it was about 3 a.m, and I was walking around. We were living on a farm at that point. I was walking around out in the paddocks with a full moon and chatting to the moon and holding my belly, and it was absolutely beautiful experience. And walking with my dog too, and I just felt really strong and empowered and very feminine. That was nice too. And I spent quite a bit of time outside that morning with the moon and baby Julia. So with that, so the 3 days, and then the acupuncture, and then the drive home, and then when the contractions started again mildly, and I just knew that this was it, I suppose. So at about 6 p.m. again, they picked up, and I was making dinner, and we sat outside and had dinner, and the boys had steak, and I had a little bit of steak, and I just kept feeling, no, I just don't think this is the best thing to be eating right now. And I just nibbled a bit, and it was nice. We just had some time together as a family, and it was all very gentle and relaxed, and all very good in that respect. So about 9 o'clock, I think, Nick put Mally to bed, and we put him to bed in our room, and we just didn't know, he had the option of, if he wanted to wake up and be a part of it, he could, or it was his choice. And we had the option of someone coming around to take him for a while if he, sort of wanted to go away. But he went to bed, so we were quite happy with that, and he was happy with that. And probably about 9 o'clock, they were getting pretty strong, and I said to Nick, well, you go to bed too and get some rest. And I text the midwife, and she's like, right, and she sort of said, yep, well, let me know what's happening and we'll keep in touch. I just continued with the breathing and just enjoying the contractions. I did a bit of walking, and I found, for some reason, I spent a lot of the labour with my head down, bum up. And I don't know why, but I'm wondering if she needed to do a bit more adjustment in my body. But every time a contraction would come, that was the position I needed to be in. So I rolled with that. And so head down, bum up. I had a few pillows on my head and my bum right up in the air, and that was that. And we sort of laboured on there for about a half an hour, and then I woke Nick up. I said, look, I think, I need you to get up. And he was all tired and like, oh, I don't want to get up. And I had this little list that I emailed him, because Nick very much likes to work from lists, and that he was happy with that. And it was things like, if I'm not able to, he light the candles and put the music on, or, get the essential oils ready if I need them, or make a cup of tea, or get the pool ready to fill, etc., etc. So I remember contracting and looking at him, walking around, ticking things off the list, and I felt very comfortable with that. And I was like, yeah, cool, he's got his stuff and he's doing that. And I just felt very relaxed with this. And I rang the midwife at 10 o'clock and I was like, would you like to come over for a cup of tea? And she's like, well, yes, I would. And I said, and how about a baby? And she's like, okay. And she was about 2 hours away. So, so I was completely fine with that. And we rang the student midwife, and she was an hour away, so she was coming straight away. We just kept going, and Nick and I did a bit of cuddling, and I walked outside for a while, and we just kind of kept mulling about in the lounge, and the contractions were coming really fast by that. And by the time the student midwife arrived, they were really strong, and I was getting to that point where I was starting to shut down vocally, and my voice was becoming really mouse-like. And she was like, she came in and she sat by me and held my hand and looked at me and waited for my contraction to finish, which was really important because my first birth with Melly, I actually had midwives trying to talk to me through contractions and yelling at me and weird things like that. But it was just so accepting of what's going on and understanding. And it was like, asked me how I felt and what was going on, and I told her in this little mouse voice, and I was like, but it's just happening. And I just was shutting down, and I think she knew too. And so she said to fill the pool, and Nick started filling the pool, and by that point I was getting the clary sage oil on my wrists, and that was really amazing actually. I do recommend that in the resources is clary sage oil, essential oils, and always make sure you get a therapeutic grade essential oil too when you're using them. I had a few herbal preparations too for the birth, and that worked quite well too. And they were more to, I took them in pregnancy. I had a friend that is still an amazing herbalist and practitioner, and she gave me some really beautiful blends for pregnancy and blend for labour and postpartum too. So that's another thing that might be worth looking into is herbal preparations or even teas. And there's so much information out there regarding essential oils and herbs in pregnancy and labour. So each contraction by that point, I just really needed Nick there, and he would come over and I would try and push the hot water bottle, had to keep coming onto my back, and he had to hold it there and just be there, and then I'd be fine again, right, for him to go off. And the more they got intense, the more I just needed him there. So that was a little thing for a while just before I got in the pool, was like head down, bum up, hot water bottle and back, and I was happy with that. And the little tissue, I had a tissue, with clary sage on it, not on my wrists. So I felt really blessed to having there and knowing how important and connected we were together. And the midwife arrived by that point, and she came in with a beautiful smile, and I just felt so supported and happy, and really just prepared to get on with it, I suppose. And so, when they arrived, that's when things really kicked in, and I was going from, having a good break in between to chatting and we were joking, and then it was just full-on concentration, and I was just going in, and I could feel this like spiral of inwardness. I don't know how to explain it, but I could just feel myself getting sucked in to myself, and it was no going back, and I was ready for it too. And that was the best part. I was not, in comparison to my son's birth, I was a bit like, well, here, you guys handle this. And as opposed to like, I've got this. That's how I felt. And it was like, I'm going in to get it done. And I looked totally inward and focused myself so much, and I was so ready for it. So that was a really cool feeling. It's just a great feeling, and I really put it down to the breathing too. The calm breathing really helped during this sort of transition, and the deep, relaxed, sort of lymphatic type of breathing helped a lot. It was amazing. So so with that, the pool was getting ready, and I just couldn't wait to get in it. I'm a bit of a bath freak. I love baths, and I was ready for the pool. And the feeling of the water and the pool, oh my goodness, it was just wonderful. As soon as I put my foot in, I just immersed myself. It was like, wow, my whole body just released so much pressure or something, and I just ended up sort of spiraling around in it. And I think I it was the Birthing Within where they talked about the spiraling, and I had that in my mind, and I started doing that in the water, and it actually really helped too, because that was like part of the feeling I was talking about before, about going inward and just being sucked into there and being ready for it. And I just sort of redone that, I guess, in the pool, and I was just spiraling around and around and around and around, and it was just lovely. And I loved the warmth, and the contractions got a bit stronger and closer together, and I just had such little breaks in between by that point. It was they were strong and fast, and I was ready and she was ready, and I knew that this was happening. And I went from that nice deep sort of breathing to this real primal groaning, and I was just making these awesome primal sounds that were just releasing so much energy from out of my top half. And I just felt completely free to express all those noises, and I felt great with that. And I was tapped into my warrior woman, and that was one of my mantras, I think, was being that warrior woman, and strong and accepting of what my body is and what's happening. And I honestly enjoyed it. Looking like, even during that time, I enjoyed it. Apart from that transition point where I think this whole pile of stupid stuff just ran through my head, and it was like, I'm just going to run up the driveway now and like get out of here. And but it was never a point of like, I want to go and get all this stuff done to me and get drugs or a hospital or this or this or this. It was just, it was more of like, I'm just going to go run up the road for a while. And that, like, in my mind, it was like, okay, no, that's not going to happen. Come on, you got to get on with it. And that was it. Like, that was my transition point. I think it was just this sort of silliness that overcome me. And so, probably one of the most aggressive things that I did feel towards Nick was wanting to bite his arm. And I'm so not like in favour of how the media portrays that women should just like really put so much hate onto their partners in birth and like swear at them and all these horrible things. I just think it's a horrible way to like portray birth, but we could go on about that. But when I felt like biting his arm, it wasn't like this aggressive, like, I don't like you bite. It was like, man, his arms look so juicy, and I just wanted to sink my teeth into it. And I just remember like baring my teeth and looking at his arm and then just going, no, that is not a good idea. But that was about it. I just really wanted to eat his arm. But yeah, he was there for pretty much all my contractions nearly, apart from the midwives when they came through. And it was great. Like, I just wanted him there, and I really felt connected to him, and just holding him and having him just hold my back. And I knew that he did feel a bit anxious at some point too, and I know that this was big for him. And but it was just nice to have him there, and I just, it felt good. And the midwives were wonderful. I just felt completely respected as a person and our choices. And I just remember looking at them during parts of the labour, and they were just sitting on the bed and like just resting, or they'd be having a tea in the kitchen and like having a bit of a joke. And I felt so warm. I was like, that's so nice. They're happy, and they just, I didn't, need to be checked. I didn't want to be checked. I really had no reason to want any of that or any timing or anything like that. And I just felt comfortable with their presence and with what was going on with my body too. And it was this relationship that was built up like that I knew that they had such an innate knowledge of birth and what was happening to a woman without having to go and do a lot of the checks and rigmarole. And I had the Doppler on the belly at the end and during the labour too, and that was about it. And that was nice, and it was so non-invasive, and it was just, they were there and I needed them there, and but yet they didn't make a big feature of the labour, which was really good. And so I was carrying on making my birth movements and noises, and I got really hot. And I remember all I wanted was, Nick had a bucket of cold water with some peppermint oil and a flannel, and I just kept saying, put it on my face. And it was just so hot, and I threw open the window and right next to me, and this was, it was starting to get cool at night, and it wasn't exactly that warm, and so everyone's probably really cold, and I was here sweating, and they started putting more warm water in the pool because they knew that we were getting to the final stages. And I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, the baby would need warm water. I'm like, it's so hot. And they were shutting the windows, and I was like, I had to just roll with that. But it was super hot, and I got a little bit like cranky, but then just realised that there's no point. So I dealt with the peppermint oil and the cool face wash, and just tried to like that as much as I could. So each contraction, I'd be on my knees with my head over the pool, and then I'd flip on my back to rest, and then I remember flipping back over for a contraction, and then, bang, I'd have these super like double contractions that would just peak and peak. And I remember like just going, oh, again, that was so quick. And I had no idea of the times between them, but they felt so quick. Like I felt like I'd flip back over, and by the time I flipped back over, I'd flip back again. So I think I just stopped flipping back over and stayed on my knees with my head and my hands over the pool. One of my other mantras was let the rivers flow. And during the pregnancy, actually, was another thing that happened. I had a bout of really bad constipation, and I did a lot of looking into constipation emotionally about blockages and how you're sort of holding stuff in, but it was definitely a circulation thing. And I know, I had that trouble. It was 2 days, and it was pretty horrific actually, and I got a good understanding into what people go through when they're suffering from constipation, because my goodness, it was horrible and it hurt. And that's where I came up with that mantra, and every time I'd go to the toilet, let the rivers flow was my little thing that I'd say to myself in the pregnancy, and that's what kept flowing around in my head. And there was a part during that labour where I fully had this cool visualization where like Julia was like gliding down this massive open river and like into my arms, and the river was huge, and she was just like like having fun, like flowing down it, and that was my body. And in the background, the midwives they must have known that I was getting really that intense point, and I just heard breathe and you're open, and it was just, that was it. It was just so quiet, and they were in the background. It's just like, it just helped so much. It really regulated me back again, and I got back into the swing of it, because I was getting too sort of top heavy, I suppose, and just got really deep and back down into it. And I felt really tuned in and aware of the process that was happening to my body, and that was just wonderful. And the spiraling happened again. I just felt that spiral, similar to like, a snail shell or something. I kept visualising that. And this is when the point became with all the pressure, and this was the pushing, the so-called pushing stage. And I remember looking out to the midwives, and I said, I feel like pushing. And that was it. And then it was just all back inwards again. And I went with it, and I didn't push. I honestly, from knowing with Mally's birth that I was kind of tucked up in a bit of a fetal position myself, trying to push him out for a good while. With her, I just didn't push. I really didn't. I felt her come down, and it was my body just took over, and it was really bizarre because it got really intense at sometimes, and did start to panic a bit because I was like, is this really quick? And I just felt no need to push. It was like, it was really, really surreal feeling. And she just let herself out. She was ready to come out, and she just let herself out. And it happened in about 6 minutes. It was unbelievable. When that moment I was like, oh, I feel like pushing. And then it was just really primally sort of screams. And so out she came. And so this was probably my most favourite part of the whole birth and the birth journey. Was she flew out, honestly. And prior to that, Nick was planning to get into the pool with me, and he was going to catch her. And he sort of said to the midwives before that, oh, I better get my swimmers on. And I was like, no, you're going nowhere. And he just didn't want him to leave. And I felt actually a bit bad after that with that, but maybe next time. So he had to be there, and I was like grabbing onto his legs because it was just so intense, this pressure. Oh my goodness, it was so intense. And so he couldn't go anywhere, and 6 minutes probably wouldn't have been enough time anyway to get all that happening. She flew out literally, and she went into the pool, and the midwife was behind there, and in a calm, pleasant voice, which was just beautiful, she's like, whoop, she's popped out. And I turned around, and it was dark, and we just had to sort of scrounge around in the pool to find her. And I grabbed her, and we shone the torch sort of in the pool a bit, and not like in her face, but in the pool. And I started to pull her up, and then I held her under the water for a second or two, and she had her eyes open, and she was looking around, and she just looked straight at me, and it was just, it was amazing. It was possibly, that's, top whatever list of amazing feelings, like that's it. That's number one. It was just so super cool to just feel that and connect with her there, and gave her that time just to sort of be there too, because it was pretty quick the way she come out. And so we brought her up, and she came into the water, into my arms, and she was blue for a little bit, and she took her time, and if it was all gentle, I just cooed her, and we sort of talked to her and wrapped the towel around her, and just, it was very gentle and calm. And she just took this little, and went pink, and that was it. It was just so cool, because it was just this little and there she was. And she was just there, and she laid there for a while, because I think she had a bit of shock from coming out that quick. So we had a lot of quiet time after that, and just laid there, and it was amazing. And one of the other things that I'd really noted too was my legs shaking. It was so much energy still coming out of my body, trying to catch up with how quick that happened. And the shaking in my legs was just amazing. So my legs are just going 100 miles an hour while I'm just sitting there all quietly, peacefully holding Julia. And that was good. No panicking. It was just really calm, and everything that I guess that I really worked for and visualised and wanted to happen. So and she was straight on the boob, and she still is on the boob. She loves the boob. She was just straight onto it. She's a big booby fan, so she was ready for it. And then half an hour later, I birthed the placenta, and we had her cord cut after that, and we had her cord cut after it stopped pulsing, and she went over to Nick and he did some skin to skin with her, and I sat in the pool, and I remember going to the midwife. It was like, oh, do I have to birth this placenta now? I was like, is there more? And I just remember like putting my hand up there and feeling it, and it was right there ready to come out. So I birthed that, and that was a funny feeling too, because it was like, whew, this little popping out it is. And then we all had cup of tea and cake, and one of my things I kept making for about 3 weeks was birthday cakes, nearly twice a week. I wanted one ready for after the birth, and it ended up happening. So we had this beautiful, grain-free, healthy cake and cups of tea, and we were looking at the placenta, and it was getting taken back by the midwife to get encapsulated, and by the student doula, to get encapsulated. And we were left there at 5:30 in the morning with just elation and joy, and it was just beautiful. And the best part was, because Mally was totally happy with that he slept right through the whole thing. Even the midwives going past to go to the toilet, he slept through it all, and he slept through to 7:30. We had to go wake him up with baby Julia, and we put her next to him, and he turned around and there she was. And it was so funny because I was like, Mally, how could you sleep through that late? And he's like, yeah, well, I did wake up and I heard these noises like animals and stuff, and I thought I was just dreaming, so I went back to sleep. And I was like, oh, cool. And that was it. He went back to sleep, and bang, gone. Here's a baby for you, your little baby sister. And he was pretty happy with that too. And so that just worked out really well. And so we had a little glass of champagne each, and I was full of a bit of adrenaline still, and I don't recommend doing this, but I got up and I was like, I need eggs, and I went and made the biggest plate of eggs. And we just had eggs for breakfast, and I was all full of beans, and I decided that I really needed to get back to sleep. So in total, our labour was about, the labour was about 5 hours from when the midwives arrived at about 10, about midnight. Probably about 10 till when the baby was born. So she was born at 2:50 a.m, and 6-minute pushing. So that was it, and I absolutely enjoyed the whole experience. I felt strong, I felt primal, but inward I just felt so calm and connected, because there was that point where I felt myself and I guess my ego, or all of those things that encompass your mind and your thoughts, go into that space, and I was ready to go down in there and let my body take over. And I could say that's probably one of the really important things about preparing for birth, is surrendering yourself to the moment, because your body knows what to do. It knows what's going on, and it will let you know if anything's wrong. And that's how I felt about it anyway. So with that, I just felt very womanly again, and very feminine. I was like, I'm a woman. And I just rejoiced in the birth, and the postpartum period was really cool too. And so in terms of resources, I would I'm going to list obviously all these on the website, and we're going to start a really great pool of resources for people, because that's really important for me too. I think there's just so many fantastic people out there that are in the birth, pregnancy and beyond field that, range from authors to producing videos to therapists, practitioners, podcasters, that we all need to get together and collaborate. And so if I can just create even a little resource group there for people to go to, I think it's very important, especially too for a lot of people that's come through some sort of traumatic experience, so to speak, with birth or something that didn't quite go their way, and how they overcome it. Those resources are probably the most invaluable ones that people will find too. So for this labour, I found essential oils, clary sage and peppermint was amazing. The birth pool, if you can, in the hospital, find a hospital that does water births, I'd highly recommend that. Coconut water and pineapple juice for rehydration, really good combo. Acupuncture for anxiety, not to sort of try and bring labour on as such, but to help with the anxiety. Baths, water again, even if you're labouring at home, try and sort of have as many baths as you can. They're amazing. And the breathing, probably the most invaluable there is the breathing exercises and attune to that. Your support team. And actually one of the CDs, it's in a book too, it's a book of affirmations that I listened to that was so funny and cool, it was called 25 Ways to Awaken Your Birth Power. And they had a CD, their relaxation CD, and it was really great. I got to know it quite well, and it was like, breathe in, I feel positive and empowered. I can't remember the actual wording, and then it'd be breathe out, I let go of all my fears. And so I listened to that a lot. I went through it over and over and over again. So that was a good resource. But with that, I will list all the resources that helped me for those pregnancy and the labour on the website, so you can go check them out, and I'll put them at the end of the show notes too, for every birth story and for this one. So that was that. And possibly, as I said before, one of the most memorable moments was the holding her in the water. The surge of love and compassion there was pretty cool. I just tapped into something, bit beyond my comprehension, I'm sure. So the biggest fear and challenges I overcome, with this pregnancy, I had to go right back to my childhood. I really did, and address a lot of stuff that I needed to heal. And there was a fear of my sort of previous birth with Mally, of going to hospital, and I guess that got addressed too. And I had to go through a lot of that, and I had to do a lot of processing in this pregnancy and sort of reinvent who I was and let go and just be a part of the process and just be. It was good and it was needed, and pregnancy is a great chance to do that. I feel it's a really great chance to go back through yourself and change and reinvent a lot of things in your person and who you are and what you your belief systems and your values and that type of thing. Possibly, too, and also the hospital experience, that was another challenge that we had to overcome, and just regaining that sort of control of my own health and my body. That was a big challenge when we got through that. So postnatally, the postnatal period was really good. And so the placenta encapsulation, I highly recommend. If anyone knows, there is quite a few people out there that will do that. I got mine dehydrated, steamed, then dehydrated, and I feel that made a big difference with the postpartum period, with how I felt and my energy levels. And I've still got about 10 or so in the freezer that I want to keep for myself if I notice any weird hormonal changes that are happening, or they're kind of like little gold nuggets in there at the moment. Like my partner goes the other day, he's like, why don't you take one? Because I was feeling a bit fluey, and I said, nah, I'm going to save them till like, big time things, if that ever happens. Hopefully that won't. Postnatally, rest as much as you can. Don't get up 2 hours later and just go cook a pile of eggs and run around with this excitement. The rest thing, like, I know you get told that a lot probably, but it's really important. And it's I think there is something into when a lot of cultures will do the 40 days not leaving the house side of things. I think there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot of changes that go through your body with the hormones and physical changes and emotional that just really need a nurturing environment, because you've got to nurture this little baby too. So, rest. Tongue tie, we found out she had tongue tie at 5 weeks, and so we got that addressed. We decided to cut it. We found a really good tongue tie specialist in the city, and she was able to do it at her home, which was even better. And if you ever deal with tongue tie, a good idea too is to go to an osteopath. This is from our experience too. I'm recommending this from our experience, but there's a lot to be said too of the tongue tie in the womb and how they sort of, the body forms, and it's the osteo helped with a lot of the realignment stuff, and she's getting treatment as we speak actually. Rest, essential oils, skin to skin was great. I did so much of that, and it was just so nice, that bonding. Like, she just needed that, and I needed that, because she was right there in my belly for so long, and just having her so close to me was just beautiful. And I did it as much as I could. I'd always just, like, that sort of kangaroo hold, just shove her in there and put her in the skin, and she'd be always near the boobie, which she liked. We did have breastfeeding, a bit of trouble at the start. I've got this like one super milk spurter boob that is amazing, and it's always like good old trusty one, and the other one that's just not so good. And because we didn't find out about that tongue tie for 5 weeks, there was that issues with breastfeeding, and I got this slight bout of mastitis, which was on my good side too, which is really amazing. But peppermint oil, again, really helps with circulation, and I just lathered that on with some almond oil over it, and it seemed to go away. It wasn't bad, but it was there. Definitely the heat was there, and the pain and the cracked nipples. Just keep the house quiet, and we did that. We sort of didn't have any visitors, or not many visitors, during that time. The student midwife actually made a good note, because I offered for her to hold Julia, and she's like, no, first week, it should be just the mum and the dad and, the brothers and sisters. And I really connected with that, so I just really didn't let anyone hold it for a week, and that was cool too. But it was just like I wanted her to be not confused by smells and stuff like that, and just close to us as a family. The other thing, bone broths and slow cooks. If I've written an article that I'll publish to the website about them, I just have found them absolutely so essential for our health, and have noticed a huge change in us and our family. And my daughter Julia now, she just like guzzles the bone broth in the morning. So yeah, they are so good for postpartum. Really, really good, and a good way to replenish all those minerals and the collagen and the amino acids that you sort of need, and releasing those nutrients slowly, and then making more bioavailable for the body. So yeah, bone broth slow cooks, and I'll put a paper up there about them soon too. And just take care of you. And my parting words of wisdom, and I've just actually really enjoyed doing this story. It's I was worried that I wasn't going to sort of talk for very long, but once, and which I hope the people that I talk to, once you get into it, you engage with the story, then you're there, like you're just right there. And then I was there, so I've enjoyed doing this, and I hope you all enjoy listening to it. And my sort of words of wisdom, I suppose, would be to just let go, drop the hold, I suppose, and all the pressure that's around by people all the time with a barrage of opinions and do this, do that, don't do this, and you should do this, and how you should feel, and trying your best to let go of that and listen from within, and listen to your intuition, and listen to what's going on with your body, because that knows best. And Be open to what comes your way with the pregnancy and the birth, and allow yourself to feel and know that it's okay to feel, and know your choices. My goodness, know your choices and do your research and accept the ones that others make too. It's fine that other people make these choices, and your choices should be accepted as well. And that's how we're going to come together. We need to, more importantly as ever, come together in birth and respect the choices that people make in their lives and why they make them. And this is why I want to create this space as being a really neutral, safe, good space for people to come and talk about their experiences without feeling guilty, and hopefully maybe process a lot of the feelings themselves, and connect with others and be gentle and kind to yourself, and get all the support you can. It's so essential. Get all the support and surround yourself, and totally listen to birth stories. Hey, listen to the Circle of Birth stories like this one. I hope we get lots of people that will come on and hopefully share their stories and all the cool projects that they're up to, and we can all link together. And so listen to birth stories, read birth stories, and immerse yourself with other people's journeys too, and create that understanding. Take what you need and leave the rest. That's all I have to say. So thank you so much for listening to this first ever podcast. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to connect with me, you know where to go, right here at the Circle of Birth. And I'll upload some beautiful pictures and get the word out there. I look forward to talking to as many people as I can, and being a part of this journey with you guys too. Okay, thank you. Did you enjoy this episode? To see show notes, pictures, resources, and potentially connect with today's storyteller, head over to our website, circleofbirth.com. Did you really enjoy the show? Then visit our website and help us grow by contributing a tip in the jar to make sure we can continue to release the podcast and connect more and more to the wisdom of birth and each other. Hey, and don't forget the iTunes rating. This is a Birth Share project. We breathe, we birth, we empower.